Hi, Steve. Can you hear me?
Yeah, so the first day we get an agreement for that. I should have quit then. I had to get back down.
I mean, I know we're waiting on you, so.
All right, are we all here? I don't see,
Michelle said she'd be on.
but we got, wait, so 6:30. Great.
Michelle? I don't know. I know I'm supposed to be on that route. Actually. Now it's running. Yes.
Oh, good. All right. Good evening, everyone. I call this meeting of the Kingston City Finance Committee to order at 6:35 here on August the 10th. Hybrid meeting, 3 members of the committee present in the room, 2 members online. All right, great. So our first order of business is to hear the news about our finances from Comptroller John Toohey.
All right.
Floor is yours.
Okay. Thanks, Frank. So I provide an update to each of you. Hopefully you have that. I also emailed it out. In terms of the general fund expenses and revenues, there's not a lot of change in the trending for the year. Some things I did want to highlight to you is the inflation. We kind of looked before. I think a lot of you are aware as you're following the economy and the news, but July 2022 was the first month this year where the inflation rate was stagnant, 0 for the month. So that's a good thing for our consumers and our constituents. It will have some trickle down effect on our sales tax. I think you'll start to see the sales tax receipts drop a little bit. Of note, gasoline prices were down 7.7% for the month. They're still up over 44% over a 12-month period, but on the month of July, they're down 7.7%. Gasoline prices are a big driver with our sales tax. So just keep that in mind. Sales tax, you have the report there. Year to date, we're still $712,000 over where we were in 2021. We are just over 9% higher than last year. 2 of the last 3 checks were negative year over year. So I do think you'll see that trend continue. I'm not concerned at all about whether or not we're going to make budgets. It's just a question of how much over budget we will be. We have a very conservative sales tax budget, but I've explained that negative variance, a large negative adjustment at the last meeting. But I do think now, we'll see our sales tax normalize. You'll start to see sales tax collections are more in line with the 2021 levels, or even somewhere between the 2021 levels. So I'll keep updating on that. But once again, on a year-to-date basis, we're still over $700,000 greater than last year. And last year, we're significantly over budget. So that is the update. On the investment side, the interest rates are picking up. We're now, the numbers here were as of July 31st. As of today, some of the rates now that we're seeing are over 2% on the investment side. So we should have a significant, some significant favorable variances on interest income in our budget. We wrap up the year, we stay on this path. And contingency balance is 367 minus what was adopted this month. So we put the numbers in. There are no draws from contingency, I believe, in this month's financial agenda. So when we sit down next month, I'll have updated numbers for you. If there's any requests from contingency, we'll have an up-to-date balance to look at. Okay, that's it. Our audit is due September 30th, so in the next 2 months, I'll have some final numbers for you for 2021.
Great. Any questions, Tony Davis?
John, this is where I'm looking at overtime pay. Is that consistent with last year? Is this a 62 expended, and do you know offhand?
I don't have last year's numbers in front of me, but what I can tell you, it is high. We are, well, and there's a correlation to the regular pay in the paragraph above. Through June, we'd only spent 42% of our regular pay. So we still have vacancies in a number of departments. That's a driver of overtime pay. We've also had some significant events that have driven overtime pay. So, you know, well, as we wrap up the year, I would expect that we're going to have, continue to need transfers for overtime. Hopefully, in most of those cases, we'll be able to take some funds from the other departmental personnel lines, mainly the regular pay lines.
All right. The only other question I see, 48,000 over the budget line for retirement. I know we can't foresee that because people can decide, make that decision at any time. You say you see one expected additional budget transfer.
Oh, I believe some already, that's 48 over the modified budget as of what's been entered in our accounting system. That doesn't include those transfers that were adopted by the council in August. So that'll go against that. And keep in mind, with the retirement accumulation account, we do not budget anything, right? So we're generally pulling those monies from contingency, or to the extent the departments have funds within their department, we pull from there. So we're starting at a zero budget with those accounts. So, right?
Yep. Thank you.
Yep.
Michelle Hirsch?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. John, regarding overtime, I just wanted to know if the Kingston City School District is reimbursing the Kingston Police Department for the patrols and breathalyzers that were used at the prom.
I'll have to look into that with you, Michelle, and I'll get back to you. I know there's been some billings by the police department. I don't recall exactly who they were to, so.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else for John Toohey on the general state of our finances?
John, quick question. I see vehicle fuel is almost at 80% already. Obviously, I know that's due to the increase in prices. Do we, other than DPW, do we buy in bulk?
We buy through, the DPW has the fuel depot, and everything goes through Public Works. And they have a supplier that's competitively procured, and we buy through that.
Okay.
We do have some fuel cards, but it's more of a contingency in emergencies.
Okay.
Sure.
All right, anything else? Hearing nothing else, then we'll move into our committee reports. The first one is from Public Works, an internal transfer of $7,500 as per attached. Basically, these are transfers to cover the cost of shortfalls in accounts in DPW. The financial impact is zero. Do we have a motion to discuss? Tony Davis, second. Michael Olivieri, any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. And I will be signing for the two members who are absent, but I'll do that when this comes back around. The second one is from,
Sorry,
Oh.
for the two members who are remote,
I'm sorry, yeah, what did I say?
absent. It took me a minute to
Oh,
come.
okay. The two members who are remotely present. Thank you, Bob.
Oh, she can't.
She's not sitting.
The second item here is from Housing Initiatives. Bartek is here to tell us a little bit about this one.
Yes.
So if you want to step up and Bartek Saradai, welcome.
Thank
Let us know what's happening here.
Squeeze in here. Excuse me. So the city has been sitting on an unused grant from the Community Foundations of Hudson Valley. This was originally awarded to the city in 2018 to renovate 124 Franklin into offices for community development. That project never occurred. In fact, 124 Franklin was sold to the land bank and is currently being renovated into affordable residence. So I'm here before you tonight to ask that that grant be reallocated toward an ongoing project, which is the rehabilitation of 33 Franklin, 44 Franklin, and 54 Van Dusen. I'm currently using New York State Restore Grant to start those renovations. However, the use of this unused grant would greatly help the budget, and it also would help our partner, Rubco, who will be finishing the renovations and then selling the homes to first-time homebuyers.
What number is that on name using?
54.
54. So you're watching, so, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. You got questions, Tony? Go ahead.
Yes, so this was money that was allocated for Franklin Street.
Yes.
And when you guys didn't take that over, when they moved into your office, they moved in there, now that money's still sitting out there, is that what they were saying?
Right.
And now you want to use the money to go towards these three projects.
Right, the original grant was to renovate, that building for offices. And so that never got off the ground for various reasons. And so this is makes sense to use these funds for these three homes instead.
And you can use those funds for that
Yes,
purpose?
so we do have verbal agreement and the mayor is working on a written agreement as well, which will be received before the money is actually spent.
That kind of answered my question. So with the grant, was it specifically for that address?
Yes.
So we're allowed to make an amendment to that?
Yes.
That answers that question.
Any other questions from our remote members? Hearing none, then I'll call for a motion to discuss.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Michael Olivieri, seconded by Tony Davis on a report that reads description, internal transfer of 2018 Community Foundations of the Hudson Valley Grant for use of the rehabilitation of 33 Franklin, 44 Franklin, and 54 Van Dusen. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Bartek. Next is another internal transfer. This one is from the Parks and Recreation Department. The description reads internal budget transfer of $59,150 to reconcile department's accounts. There's a spreadsheet that details these. So I do have a motion to discuss. Tony Davis, second by Michael Olivieri. I see, I'm sorry, Lindsay's here. Does anybody have any questions for Lindsay?
Can you read this, what this is again, because I don't have it.
It's an internal budget transfer to reconcile department accounts with a financial impact of zero.
Wow. No questions.
All right, so we've got a motion and a second. Then is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item is a request to develop a disposition policy for the city in terms of properties that we obtain. I believe,
And there's physical copies right here.
I think I'll start, and then if folks have specific questions, Bartek and I can kind of
Great.
tag team.
Thank you. Anything.
So I'll give just kind of like a high level overview. I know for some of you, this may be the first time you're seeing it, because we just sent it out. And so we just kind of wanted to take this opportunity to just kind of go over this in broad terms, and then maybe if you have any specific questions so far, we can answer those. But what we wanted to be able to do in kind of at the 30,000 foot level was to be able to have more of a broad policy on how we handle our in-rem properties. For those that have been on the council for a long time, we have handled in-rem properties a whole bunch of different ways. None of it's written down. Some through auction, some through RFP processes, some through just direct transfers to different organizations or entities. And we felt like it would be a good time for us to put on paper what we think are some of the best methods. And so we were able to do this with our staff. This has been looked at by our city assessor, our corporation counsel's office, John and Tombo's office, Bartek and our housing office. And we feel like this kind of covers, some of the main, disposition methods. And we kind of did it in kind of a hierarchical sort of framework, with one being, of course, when a city takes a property, it ultimately has the right to decide what it wants to do with it. And so that is really the first item, is that for all properties, obviously it is up to the city and the council ultimately to decide who to dispose the property to. And so we obviously didn't want to change that. And we really left that in here as, in the end, when it comes to the, disposition of property, it is still up to the city to decide what they want to do with it. But from a policy perspective, we really felt as though we want to continue to support the development of first-time home buyers through the renovation and rehabilitation and the disposition of our 1- and 2-family properties to the Kingston City Land Bank. We, as the common council, created the Kingston City Land Bank. We've seen success with the Kingston City Land Bank of getting our in-rem properties back into the hands of families in our city. And so the policy basically says that for properties that are 1 or 2 family that have $30,000 or less of back taxes, we would transfer all of those properties to the Kingston City Land Bank at potentially a discount, depending on how low of an AMI they're able to get this house to. And so we put in a variety of tiers. So if they're below 80% AMI, they would pay one price. If it's 80 to 100% AMI, they would pay a different price. If it's over 100% to 130%, they would pay a higher price. And then if it's above 130% AMI, they would pay the full value of the back taxes at the time. And so that's one of the kind of categories there. We also created a category for the conveyance of land. We do sometimes receive vacant land. And so again, working with, the Kingston City Land Bank, we wanted to be able to give them that opportunity to, for those that are under $30,000 worth of back taxes, the ability to acquire those from us and then be able to get them into the hands of either themselves to develop a project or work with partners in the community, to build a new home for someone on this property. It goes into specifics on how that would all work. And then there's the concept of, what do we do for properties that have back taxes over $30,000? And so what we set up was really a 2-stage process. One where if we would develop an RFP, and that RFP for that specific property would go out. It would correspond with all of the goals and objectives that we have in plans like our comprehensive plan or our midtown revitalization strategies or our downtown revitalization strategies or uptown. And then we would put out an RFP, we would review those responses, we would bring recommendations to the common council, and then the common council could decide to award that property to an entity, a nonprofit, to a developer. But if that fails, if we have no bids that come in for that property, or we, deem that there's no good bidders, we would then provide that property to kind of a public auction, which would then basically just, we put it out there and, go through the official auction process, see who bids on it, and kind of the person that bids the most gets the property. That is kind of the least advantageous, we think, because we then lose a lot of control over what happens with that property and, whether it just come in and get flipped, and turned into, it could be out of town folks, purchasing the property. And so again, when we're trying to incentivize, home ownership here in Kingston, we think that if we go through this, new process, being able to have these buckets, and this strategy, it's something that we all can get to learn how to use. It's something that, our partners can understand, what happens when we get these in-rem properties. And it kind of lays out what we think is a pretty good strategy, so that there is less, confusion when it comes to our in-rem process when we take a property for back taxes. We'll generally know pretty quickly which route it's going to go. It's got $30,000 or less. It's generally going to go this direction, and these are the steps, and these are the reporting periods. This is what the land bank would have to prove to us. This is the AMI levels that we would want to see. If it's more than 30,000, we basically know instantly that, we want to be able to then create RFPs, get those out the door, advertise those, bring them back to you, and then so on. And so it keeps us moving. And this policy also includes a lot of kind of timeliness. It involves having quarterly reports coming back to the Common Council to be able to show, how successful, they've been in their work. Give you an opportunity to ask questions and learn more about the work. And we really felt like it's also important to create that dialogue, with our partners, in the community. And so that's kind of a high level overview. I don't know, Bartek, if I missed anything, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I just want to say from the housing perspective, I feel like this will prevent properties from languishing. Like currently there isn't a clear process for what to do with the vacant property or vacant structure. And so this sets a clear process that property will follow. I think it will provide clarity for everyone, really, in terms of what the goal is from the city side.
Any questions for the mayor? Or Bartek? Right, Dave?
Just walk me through this process and maybe the lay person out there. How does the city obtain property? How long does it have to be back tax not paid, whatever it might be, before the city gets that? And
Sure, so I can start with just, there's the old way, and then there's actually some new work that we're doing that's a great time to talk to you about. Generally speaking, the city, kind of pre-COVID times, because during COVID, there was foreclosure moratorium in place, so we weren't actually able to do any foreclosures. But prior to that time, generally the city would have an individual not pay their taxes for 3 years. During that time, they would get notices and reminders. They would then get basically what's called a 90-day letter, which basically saying that they have 90 days to be able to either pay their taxes or come in and enter into an installment plan with the city that we would then, usually for another 2 years, be able to allow them to. They have to pay some money down, and there are some, kind of stipulations with that agreement, but we really tried to work with people so that they didn't have to lose their home. And that process, has worked, but there are definitely ways for us to refine that process. And so as part of some of the grant money that the city has received, Bartek has been leading an effort to bring in an outside law firm to be able to work with us to be able to better define our in-rem process, to kind of get up to date with all of the new laws that have come out that have actually made it easier for the city to be able to work through that process and to be more clear with, our taxpayers about, the foreclosure process. but we've also used grant money that we currently have as well to work with organizations like RUPCO to do foreclosure prevention. And so making sure that folks that are on our list of back taxes know that there's help out there for them to kind of dig themselves out of this with a variety of federal and state resources. And so that is generally how we, and then so the ones, if someone still doesn't pay and doesn't enter into a plan, we then go ahead and file for foreclosure. We have to do a motion in front of the local court system, and a judge would then award basically title to the city, and then the city would then accept that deed, and then it gets officially changed into our name as the city, and it becomes basically city property at that point. And you know, we don't then pay taxes on it, but then we have that, you know, lien, and the city makes the school district and the county whole on all of the taxes up until that point. And so when you see a property that says they have $28,000 in property taxes due, some of that's the cities, some of that's the counties, a majority of that is actually school district, you know, taxes, but the city has made all of those other entities whole already. So that's just, so anytime we sell one of these properties, you know, we are recouping funds that we have paid many, many years before.
Okay.
And John's office keeps track of all of that, and so we have a sense of, you know, all of that for each year that, you know, someone doesn't pay. Because we do have some people who have paid partial payments each year, and it becomes, you know, sometimes there's many, many years of non-payment taxes.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Other questions for the mayor or Bartek? Michelle Hirsch?
Mute.
You're muted.
Unmute.
Thanks, Rennie. So this is a question for the mayor and Bartek, and I guess John Tui as well. How many properties does the city currently have in REM, or not in REM, but have foreclosed on that we have that are below the 30,000? That would be what we're looking at.
Yeah, so there are currently 5 properties with structures on them that are under 30,000. And there are about 17 vacant land parcels that are under 30,000.
How many?
17,
17.
so 5 and 17.
17 this land.
Yes, and keep in mind, most of those parcels are very odd shaped. You know, they're small, you can't really develop on them. The majority of those 17 really don't have much value, but that current count is 17.
And that does not include basically we haven't taken, because of COVID, we haven't taken any properties since 2019 in terms of back taxes. And so there's a long list of properties that are now eligible for us to take, but we have not yet. And so that list will grow exponentially, potentially, if we're not able to get people out of foreclosure this year or early next year when we start the process. So, and we don't yet know, you know, what those look like in terms of amounts due, but that's something that John's office is working on with Bartek at this point.
Michelle Hirsch?
Yeah, I was going to ask about the, you know, how many properties would potentially be on that list. And I want to make sure that we're being really careful to help those homeowners because they shouldn't be punished because of COVID, and making sure that we're doing all of our due diligence around them.
Yeah, I agree. And my office currently has a grant, and we have a contract with RUPCO, and they will help us with foreclosure prevention counseling when we actually start doing future interims. So obviously the goal is to prevent the foreclosure in the first place. That's a big win, obviously. But if that doesn't happen, you know, this sets out a plan for how we move forward.
Okay. And then how many families are now in formally foreclosed properties with the Kingston Land Bank that are taken ownership at this time?
I know I've been to at least 3 ribbon cuttings, so I do know that. So we've at least placed 3 families, and I think there are a couple of other properties that are under current development. One on Franklin Street, one on Greenville Avenue. Yeah, but I do know that we as the city have also, granted, I think there's a pipeline of five more that are in development with a new program the state has called Legacy Cities, that provides funding to be able to renovate and get those houses. So between that, I guess there's three that have been placed, and then there are seven more that are in the pipeline right now, seven more houses.
This is totally different than, oh man, that program that Mrs. Landy used to run, this is totally different.
Yes,
When is that program?
as you know.
That's totally different.
Yeah, and so like in this case, our partners, for instance, with our new plan, if there's a partner like Rupco, Habitat, Youth Build, they would be working with the Kingston City Land Bank to acquire potentially some of these properties that are under $30,000, right? For properties that have over $30,000, if they would then be submitting RFPs for us to review. So the land bank would submit potentially an RFP, Youth Build could potentially submit an RFP, a private developer could submit an RFP, and then we would, kind of gauge who's got the capacity, who has the resources to kind of get that specific project done. But under 30,000, and we've talked to the Kingston City Land Bank about this, they are more than willing to continue to work with all of the partners that already exist. Because it's really, we're all in this to be able to create, affordable houses, right? And we want to be able to create homes for people, and we want these properties back on the tax rolls. And so I think everyone is committed to doing that as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible, and really just trying to get these, zombie homes back into use.
Thank you.
We also have with us, do you have a question?
No, you can.
Will, go ahead, go ahead.
This is great to have some standardization like this to the process, and also, I don't know if you already said this, but it enables like planning for like the land bank to know how many properties may be in the pipeline or, so that's, I started looking at some of the tapes of the land bank because I'm really interested in that concept, and, it made an impression upon me in the last meeting, in order to know how to plan for their future staffing up or services, so just wanted to say that. I'm all for it.
Well, so just, I'm gonna put this in layman terms. So basically, anything under $30,000 owed would automatically go to the land bank if they wanted to.
Unless we as the city decide to pull a property for a purpose that we decide, if we need to create a new, so there's the first caveat is that basically, out of any property that we take, if there's a reason for us to want to keep it ourselves, we obviously have that first option. But other than that, yes, everything under 30,000 goes to the land bank. 1 and 2 families, not commercial, not 3, 4, or 5 families, just the 1 and 2. Everything commercial or more than 2 automatically goes to an RFP process.
Okay,
Yeah.
so then I guess my follow-up question is just looking at this. So let's say, for simplicity's sake, someone owes $27,000. But for whatever reason, the people qualify in that tier 1 category. So that essentially means that the city is losing $20,000 of that money that was owed.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And then another question is maybe for Barbara, but is there, in my mind, I would love to see something where, okay, step 1 is we have a property, maybe put an RFP, that's step 1, where someone can potentially bid on it, and we get the city collects the full taxes owed on this, but we put in there a stipulation that the buyer, whoever is buying the property, must be, if they're flipping, it must be a first-time homeowner.
You're asking if we can create something like a weighted option that gets.
Well, possibly that if someone, like, if I'm interested in looking at this property at an auction and I know that, okay, I can buy this house for $27,000 and then be able to flip it for, let's say, $150,000. that I'm aware that, okay, if I'm selling this property, it has to go to a first-time homebuyer.
There isn't an easy yes or no answer to your question.
Okay.
And part of it is because you're talking about the auction process, and there's some open questions about whether or not you're also contemplating, but what's the council's role in that? What is the standard that's applied to figuring out which first-time home buyer? There are kind of a lot of criteria that you have to sort out, even to come up with an answer about whether or not what you're describing is possible, but I think from a policy perspective, we're still not necessarily capturing, what our comprehensive plan is trying to achieve, which is a broader range of income that a policy like this allows us to achieve. I'm hedging a little bit because part of what my office spent some time this past summer, earlier this summer, researching were different creative options for different approaches to property disposition. I don't want to get too into the weeds of the hypothetical, but it's not an easy yes or no answer. I think from, again, the policy answer, which our tech can elaborate on more, is that this gives us opportunities that what you're describing wouldn't, in terms of the end user or the end owner.
Yeah, it's just, again, my concern is I look at it as, yeah, we're doing this, but $7,000 out of how much is owed. So I'm looking at it as not we're getting 7,000, we're losing, in my example, $20,000 of it. And I'm just, is there a streamlined process we can develop where we have the opportunity to first get all the taxes that are owed to us? And then if not, okay, then, whatever auction period, RFP, whatever we want to go by it, that's step one. If that fails, then okay, automatically step two is boom, let's give it to the Kingston Land Bank. I would like that extra step there so the city can actually recoup, what's actually owed.
And I think one of the things that we, I think that looking at that math equation, right? And I think that from my, at least, kind of outside view of the work that the land bank does, as you probably know, as a city kind of created entity, the mayor gets to appoint the board. And so there is, kind of some oversight and kind of input into, the work that they do. So because of that, we actually get to see, where they spend their money, right? It's a 501c3, it's a nonprofit. You're able to look at, how much it costs to renovate homes these days. And I think that that's why really I'm asking, they're asking, for a discount for these folks that are at the lower AMI levels. Because just for instance, the house that they, renovated on Hasbrook Avenue in Reward, down by, Randolph Gardens. Spent, I think the cost of that house, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, was just over $350,000 to renovate the home. Basically, they had to bring it down to the studs. The house was falling apart, brick home, beautiful, but in terrible condition. That kind of renovation cost is not, unfortunately, far off from the other renovation costs that they saw during those other two properties that they did. And seems to be the new cost of what it takes to renovate substantial renovations of a house. But yet the AMI level, they sold it for like 160. Because that is what the AMI level will support for someone that makes 80% AMI nowadays in Kingston, to be able to buy a house for the first time. And so they basically took a $150,000 hit, on that house. And they did that for all of their properties. And so they, in order to meet that gap, they have to get private funding source, they have to get grants from the state, they have to get donations, wherever they can, to be able, from the community, like people actually giving donations to, pay for the rest of that house cost. And so this is kind of our way, at least for the houses that don't have outrageous amounts of back taxes, right? So these are 30,000 or less. We wanted to be able to kind of give basically our share, our contribution to kind of creating affordable housing is that delta. So that $20,000 delta, while you could look at it as like a loss to the city, it could also be looked at as kind of the city's investment into creating that, workforce housing. And that's kind of a little bit of the bigger story of like why these discounts are being asked from us, and I think why they are somewhat needed, because right now, the cost of housing is so high. And yet how much people can afford is, and the salaries that people make in Kingston just don't match right now. And that's where I think we could help, and so that's at least the benefit of us doing it this way, is that we can prove that by looking at their bottom line. Having a private developer say come in and bid on a project, we have no idea what they're spending on a house. We don't know if they're doing a good renovation. We don't know, what they're, who they're paying, whether they're paying people under the table, not under the table. Like, we lose control sometimes when those things happen. And I feel like that's the one other benefit of being able to work with kind of nonprofit organizations that are kind of already under public scrutiny. Is that we're able to at least see a little bit more where our money's going compared to kind of a private developer that promises to build us, to place someone that's a first-time home buyer, but we really don't know what that home buyer is gonna get. Because they don't have the protections in place that this type of program would allow, in the future.
So,
I just wanted to add, and I think the mayor's final comments were sort of going in the direction of my addition, and that's just that this policy, your question, Mike, sort of assumes that we either get the whole, say, 27,000 or not, but we're not talking about the other kind of negative externalities of our current system or a system that doesn't engage a nonprofit partner. And so I think part of what we can follow up on or think about in a more detailed way is, what is the city already losing in terms of costs by not having more diverse housing stock of the kind that would support a lower AMI than this other system. So,
my follow-up, so we're using a scenario, $27,000, but as the mayor was saying, that's costing $350,000 to renovate. Now that private developer is now paying $350,000 to get that house up to whatever standards. They're not a first-time homeowner with AMI, low income thing. It's not going to be able to afford that because they're not going to, the private developer is not going to take that hit. They're going to be like, all right, it's 27.
It's okay. You're getting into discussion here.
Oh, sorry.
So we haven't had a motion yet.
I'm sorry.
Hold on to that. If that's directed at the mayor, that's fine. Okay. It's good discussion. Hold on to that. I'm sorry. Okay. Michelle Hirsch. Question for the mayor, that is.
Hi, yes. I just had a question then about the assessments on the homes. So if they're costing so much to have renovations, how are we keeping the assessments and the taxes low enough so that the homeowners, these first-time homeowners, aren't losing their properties? Because then they fall into the same problem that took the home to begin with.
I mean, Dan Baker's not here to talk about the assessment process, but my understanding is that, Dan does his assessment process based on permits pulled and the type of work that's happening on these properties. And I do think that, these houses that have been vacant for a really long time do see assessment increases, but there is a difference between kind of the assessment and market value of the houses. And so I think that for many of our houses in Kingston, we have seen people selling them for a whole lot more. But that doesn't necessarily mean that your assessment has gone up to that level. We have seen, and when Dan looks at doing assessments for houses like this, he looks at the neighborhood and he looks at the houses around. And so if you live next door and your house is assessed at 200,000 and the house across the street is at 200,000 and this house gets renovated up to the same standards of your house or your neighbor's house, even though it may have cost more, I don't think necessarily the assessments are going to be based on how much you spent, but based on, that it now matches the neighborhood. He could probably say that in more technical terms, but I do also think that, and again, it's not before you today, but I do believe that there is state legislation that, does exist that we could potentially adopt that would allow us to work to keep assessments low for a certain period of time. But that is new legislation that's out there. I don't know if that's actually passed the state Senate yet, but But I do believe that there are people talking about that in the future for not only, just land bank houses, but for just first-time home owners in general, being able to work with them to kind of have assessment reduction, programs. So, but it's something that's definitely on everybody's radar, and it's just another one of the tools that, Bartech is looking at.
Thank you.
Great, and Michael Gilliard is here, the major domo of the Kingston Land Bank. Michael, are you on board with this plan? Do you have quibbles, comments, anything that would help push the conversation forward here?
No, we're on board with the plan, we're in full support of it, we appreciate the opportunity to have this discussed in this manner, and nothing further to add.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Mike? That Mike?
Rennie, am I able to speak?
There's a voice in my head. Is Representative Repko, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi.
Kristen Wilson, welcome.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kristen Wilson. I'm Assistant Vice President of Community Development at ROCCO and former Director of Grants Management. For many of you. I'm the only person at ROCCO who's had a chance to read this, and the mayor and Bartek let us know that this was coming out, but we didn't get a chance to get it until 4:30 today. So I'm the only person who's had a chance to read it. And I'm not exactly sure what the procedure is going to be tonight. I do hope that this will not be passed to the full Common Council vote tonight, because we haven't really had a chance to review it as an agency and absorb it. And just, having a chance to read a little bit about it tonight before I came, I do have a number of questions. And I know that Kevin O'Connor, the CEO of ROCCO, may have some concerns as well. Just a few things like in the first,
Kristen,
if it's,
I'm sorry, I'm going to stop you because since you're not speaking as somebody who's presenting this material, I think what you have to say is very important. But I don't know that it's appropriate because we usually don't allow testimony or, speaking from the general public. So in a sense, you're speaking as the general public.
You're asking if she's a member of the general public?
Well, no, I'm just, this is how generally we have not allowed people to speak to these issues unless they are presenting it. So, and what you're getting into is the area of critique and discussion. And so I'm a little uncomfortable with that.
I think it's as she said, that they haven't got a chance to read it over, and then you can always reach out to the parties that meet and voice.
Yeah.
That would be the appropriate way. That's what I think you're getting to.
Yeah.
She's allowed to reach out to the mayor or Bartek.
Go ahead and speak to us too.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I understand. I called you earlier today, and you actually asked me about the rules of this meeting because I wasn't sure, but.
Right, I'm sorry. I only got back from being out of town a few minutes before the meeting.
Yeah, I guess I don't need to get into the critique because I can't even speak for ROCCO as an agency at this point. Because I've read it. I do want to say that I think we have some concerns, and I hope that we will have the opportunity to air those concerns before it gets voted on.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. All right, then. So the first thing would be to see that if there is well, I don't actually have a committee report. So we could decide to, oh, now we've got a committee report. It's as if I just speak and things happen. I'll read the committee report. We can decide to make a motion in a second and discuss tonight. One of the options would be to put this off for another month to look at it in greater detail because this is very new for us, the document, the official document here. So I'll leave it up to you all. Is there a motion to discuss? Tony Davis, and a second. Dr. Olivieri, Randall Michelle Hirsch, okay. First. All right, so is there discussion? At this point, do we want to put this off for a month to look into it more deeply? I see Tony Davis, then Michelle Hirsch.
And, for discussion purposes, I don't think this is urgent that we can't put this off and table it into, and everybody's able to read this and get some more questions that have answered. And, you have questions later on that you might not have thought about today, to reach out to the parties that they and to get some answers. And so I have no problem tabling this one. So do I have a motion to table that?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Your hand is in the light, and I keep seeing it, so.
I don't want to interrupt the motion process and
So go ahead.
My suggestion was also going to be like we've done in the past, where there was, more complicated issues and some follow-up questions, that maybe we could set a time for some questions to be circulated and answered in advance. That would make for a more efficient future discussion.
If you want to make a motion to table, we can vote on that directly.
A motion to table.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Mike Liviere?
Second.
All in favor of motion of tabling, Vermont? We've got, okay, so all in favor, good. So we'll put this
Aye.
off as old business for our next meeting. Like Barbara's suggestion, people should start writing down their questions and then,
You or?
yeah, send them to me. And then we'll either set up a specific event to discuss them, or we'll make sure we get them to the appropriate parties and we get the answers in time. That'll give rough code to interested parties to discuss and to bring the issue forward. So everybody okay with this outcome? Yes. Okay, excellent. All right. So we'll hold this off for 1 month and then go into it in depth over the next couple of weeks. Item number 6 is the ETPA pamphlets issue from Michelle Hirsch. You want to tell us what you got going here, Michelle?
Hi, thanks, Rennie. We've put so much work into passing the ETPA here in Kingston this year and years prior. Thank you to the mayor and Bartek for doing the study, and to the council for passing the voting yes to declare a housing emergency in Kingston and for opting into the ETPA. I think that we heard from many constituents that live in ETPA covered buildings that they didn't even know that this was up for a vote, and we're showing up at the hearing just having learned about it. So I think it's really important that we reach out to the tenants of the ETPA protected buildings through our building department. We're only talking about a mailing of possibly up to 1,300 pieces, and letting them know that they have, they're now in an ETPA protected building, and that, they have rights, and passing along some information. I know Bartek's been working really hard to put together information, and I just think that we've come this far that a mailing would be really prudent. Even if the state does a mailing to the tenants, how do we know that those envelopes will be opened by the tenant, not looked at as junk mail, not thrown on a pile, but if we get something, a flyer from the city, if there's something that catches their eye, and make sure that they have the information that they need. A lot of the tenants are elderly. A lot of tenants necessarily aren't online, don't necessarily have smartphones, aren't connected to social media. And I just think a direct mailing to those apartments, even in addition to anything else the state would mail out, is just a good thing for those tenants and protects the reasons why we passed this and opted in. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm unclear what action you're calling for here, in the sense of, are you making a motion that we put aside a certain amount of money for this? Are you asking for this as a memorializing resolution, which we urge the mayor to do this? Are you asking to?
I asked Rennie, Rennie, you know what was in my communication. I asked for a mailing
I'm seeing
to
it.
go, yeah, so,
Asking for a mailing is not a clear action from the council. We don't have the power.
right, so I'd like to allocate money. So I think that the last time we did a mailing, we allocated up to $7,000. So I can't, that was for the whole city. So I would say up to $5,000.
So we can do that, again, but it would be up to the mayor to decide to spend it, because I don't believe that we have the power to force him to spend the money or do the project. So that's why I'm asking what the process is that you envision here, or other people might see as a possible process. Tony?
I mean, Michelle mentioned 1,300 residents. Do we have a list of all the residents that will be affected by this?
Yeah, so I've been.
Or do we have a list
We do have a list of the 64 buildings that are covered.
that are covered underneath this with the current tenant, or we would just send it to the building?
I am unclear about that process. We'd have to figure out the unit number.
Okay,
So there would be a discovery process that would have to be done.
and we would just send out this in English and Spanish, and that's what you're calling for, Michelle?
Yes, that is. My understanding is the building department has the information, you know, with the landlord registry.
Barbara?
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I have started to, and I haven't done it thoroughly yet, because I'm getting a lot of calls from, and especially, I was getting them before we passed this, and with good cause eviction from Stony Run. And Stony Run is like 20% of all the units that are now eligible. So I'm getting a lot of calls, and I'm trying to figure out, like the literacy level of the materials coming out from the Department of, what, DHC, what is it?
DHC.
Yeah, it's pretty intense trying to read it and decipher it for myself. And I think it would be good to have a simpler piece of material that could refer a person to more in-depth information. So I like the idea. And I've been over there a few times in the past few days. Is that right what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. I've been over there a few times in the past few days because I have a list of about 10 things that need to be addressed aside from leases. The big topic is lease increases. And just being there and people knowing I was present, I'm getting even more calls about ETBA and how to address. So obviously the landlord has not yet put anything out. I don't know what the timeline is. They're still sort of doing the same dance with tenants. And so it's, yeah, I feel like it's on me right now to respond to tenants who are slowly hearing this. And it would be helpful to know what time frame we're on to inform you.
So could I suggest a potential process here then? So Bartek, would you have time in the next week or two to give us a rough estimate of how many, of what the cost of this would be? Potential
I
cost?
have to go.
And then also to get an agreement from the mayor that the administration wants to follow through with this. And then what we could do is during the meeting in September, fortunately the September meeting is going to be a week later because of Labor Day, we could suspend the rules, introduce this legislation with the mayor's approval, so we'd be sure that it would actually follow through with what we're looking at. And then we would still be approving it on the same timeline without having to try to do something here tonight that I worry would overstep our specific powers according to the charter. Does that sound okay to folks?
I do have one additional question for this.
Go ahead.
Okay, and Barbara, I'm sorry, I'm picking on you today. So two-part question, and the second part I'm coming from the sports world. So the first one is once the mayor signed off on this, it went into effect immediately,
Sorry.
the Protection Act.
So we're opting into a system, well, in what respect?
So the second part is, again, in the sports world, if someone's, whatever happens, they can make an appeal. And the appeal doesn't happen, like nothing happens until the appeal is heard. So my concern is like in this situation, we we spend this money, we get all these flyers, we do all this, and then the landlords appeal it, and then nothing goes into effect. So if they did appeal, it's on hold, and then the tenants kind of forget about this, or they throw it away, not knowing that this is for them.
So when you're, got it. So when you're saying it can be appealed, you mean the declaration of a housing emergency?
Yes.
Appeal. I mean, anybody can bring a lawsuit, I mean, I don't want to go too deeply, but anybody can bring a lawsuit to challenge anything, we know that.
But it doesn't sound.
But the city, the council has declared an emergency, the mayor has signed it, so that stands. And so everything else will proceed apace in terms of the nomination of, the 9 members within 30 days. There's a special council meeting to approve that list once it's developed, all of that. But if you're embedded in your second question, might be details that the council wants to, or may want to share, change over time. And that's even, is that what you mean?
I just mean like right away, so like we pass this, it's in stone right now, but if someone, files a suit against it, does that delay this going fully into effect? Okay. So that was, thank you.
Okay, let me repeat then. So the process would be here that Bartek would take the communication from Michelle and try to work up, number one, some monetary figures. What's the cost here? Okay. And then the second thing would be to ensure that the mayor will actually follow through with the project, that he supports the project and would have the money spent. Okay, because we could say, hey, we're allocating $1 million to this. If the mayor doesn't want to spend it, he just vetoes it, right? So we want to make sure that he's actually on board with the project, which I'm sure he would be, right? So then, because we wouldn't be passing something specific tonight, we would use the process of suspending the rules at our September Common Council meeting. Or we could also, have a special finance committee meeting before caucus and run it then, and then it would get into the agenda for the following night.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very open to this communication, but, at this point, because we're so early in the process, I'm not sure yet what the best type of communication is going to be. And so, I would support tabling this until September personally. I can do some research in the interim period about the potential cost, but I'm not sure yet about what the best form of outreach is going to be to reach tenants. Given that, the owners under law have to notify the tenants that they're now under community control building. And the registration process is just beginning. I can't say what if the flyer is the best way to reach folks. So I just want to put that out there as well.
That would be certainly something to discuss.
So that was sort of connected to Bartek's comment. I think it'd be useful also if you could get back some more concrete details to the extent they're available about the outreach timeline and the communication timeline involving DHCR and how that information will be sent, when it will be sent, what records they keep, what follow-up they provide. It seems like that is also useful for the council.
Go ahead, Rob.
So, looking at what you put together, which is great, thank you very much. It's the ETPA summary. It says DHCR and the City of Kingston will conduct information sessions for tenants and property owners. So, and the city will announce the times and locations of these meetings on our website and to local media. We also share this information with tenants, landlords via direct outreach including postings on each ETPA property. So, reading into it, I'm thinking, okay, so there's a time frame for that outreach, and I guess that's what you're referring to. So, and then we might see that materials might change along the way a little bit as we distill the message. I'm it's not a happy thing for me because 40% of the units that we're talking about are in my ward, so I'm starting to get calls. And so I feel like I'm gonna move into the office next year, I feel like it's an education process, even for me or all of us as aldermen, if we have units in our ward. So, I might be doing something like,
Michelle,
as an alderman, I might be doing my own little flyer, so at least they know to call me, and then I try to figure out where to put things to until such time as it's more coordinated.
Michelle DeTony?
You're muted, Michelle. Muted.
The message that is the most important to get out to tenants is that they should not be signing new leases prior to the rent guideline board. So say I'm Barbara Hill's landlord, and I send her a new lease agreement to begin on October 1st and tell her that rent stabilization has not been, adopted and it does not apply to our building. She may sign an agreement before we have a rent guideline board in place and a fair market rent established with a permissible increase for rent. And she might feel pressured to go ahead and sign the rental agreement when she shouldn't. And I think it's really important that the tenants are made aware of their rights prior to the state reaching out to the landlords or the landlords informing the tenants based on the history of what's happened previously with our trying to pass this. And I just would like to make a motion then to have a special finance meeting before caucus in September.
Okay, so we have a motion for a special finance meeting before caucus on, is that September 12th?
That is September
No,
12th, or yeah, September 12th is caucus.
Yeah.
First Mondays, no, first Mondays later.
Architect, will that give you enough time to do? Okay.
and so I think what Michelle is saying, the first thing is just really important, some information up front, not necessarily because we won't have the board in place by then, we won't know what the rates are, but at least to let people know that this is happening and where we are and that there will be other steps along the way. Is that,
Correct.
Okay, good.
Correct.
Sorry. So my thing is that it's the only properties that are affected that I've just seen this rental vacancy study. And so seeing that, so as an all person, whenever you could go to these properties and say, you may want to be proactive and say, I will not sign a new lease agreement and to further notice. I'm not sure, right? Yeah.
We have a motion on the floor though. Do we have a second for Michelle's motion? The motion?
Yes.
The motion was, okay, Tony Davis seconds the motion. Do we have any discussion about having a special finance committee? Does that give us enough time, Barbara, if we do a special finance committee at 6:30 on that Monday to get something onto the agenda? Does that fit with the state rules about advance notice?
That's fine.
Okay.
There may be another scheduling hiccup, but that we can discuss that.
Okay. Okay, all right. So is there any discussion then about having a special finance committee meeting at 6:30 on September 12th?
I think you have to, what she's saying, you have to reach out to Madam President.
We'll do that. I just want to make sure there's support here.
So for that day.
Yes, if there has to be a different day, we'll send out notification. So all in favor that a special finance committee meeting for this issue? All in favor? So that's everyone in favor. Okay, good.
Thank you.
So we will do that. We'll be in touch. Anybody on the committee who has questions or further comments specifically on this, send them to me, Bartek. I'll be in touch with you if anything comes up.
Yeah, I would just like to address one point.
Sure.
Which is about what a tenant should do if they receive a lease renewal with a rent increase at this point in time. The guidance that the state has given me is that that tenant should sign the lease and file a complaint later on once the rent guideline board has been completed.
All
I
right.
mean, technically, there is a rent freeze in effect right now for these properties, and speed up the owner breaking the law, breaking the ETPA by doing that. But rather than go through the hassle of a potential eviction, it will be easier for that tenant to just file a complaint later on. So just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Sign the lease and file a complaint.
Yeah, it's called a fair market rent appeal, and it's a specific part of the process. Okay.
Okay.
I couldn't hear, so I'm sorry, I didn't hear what Bartek said. So if they have been given, can you just repeat what you said? Because it's hard to hear sometimes.
Yeah, so if a tenant has received a lease renewal offer with a rent increase and they are covered by ETPA, the state has directed me that I should advise tenants to sign that lease if they can. And file a complaint after the rent guidelines board meets.
So even if their rental agreement, say, is to begin September 1st, the state is saying,
They should sign it, and file a complaint later on.
but aren't rents frozen as of August 29th?
Yes, 100%. Rents are frozen on these buildings, and the tenant should communicate that to the property owner if for some reason the owner isn't aware. But, in cases where then the owner threatens eviction proceedings or threatens anything else against the tenant, it would be easier for the tenant to sign the lease and file a complaint directly with the state later on.
That just seems really at odds with the intent of the ETPA and what's going on with freezing the rent. So that's why I think it's really important that tenants know their rights.
Yeah. Bartek, my question for you is there a layman term that you can put that in kind of either communications to us that we can all share via social media or whatever it is, that we can, post it and say, hey, listen, this is what they're setting to do right now?
Yep.
Okay.
You can see that out to all this.
I need 500 flyers.
But again, if there's no increase in this lease agreement, it's no problem. It's only if it's saying that's going to be increased that this.
Any increase.
All right,
Okay, great.
thank you.
Any other comments about the world?
I think I just want to say that I think that the less tenants that are having to make appeals to a brand new rent guideline board, the better, because it's going to be a new regulatory board tasked with many important decisions, and to then have to start wading through a lot of appeals is just not right and fair to the tenants. So we passed this for a reason, to protect tenants, and we should continue doing so. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so hearing nothing else, then I will call this meeting to a close. We are adjourned here at 7:48 on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever day.